Hello, welcome back to the Slack Chat podcast, episode 10, with me, Stuart Winter, the architect and developer of the Slackware ARM port, and Phil, the maintainer of the SARPi project. This episode picks up where episode 9 left off, where we're in conversation with Angel Montanez, who's been a Slackware user for over 20 years and has recently come into the Slackware ARM community. He works at the USA's National Weather Service, telling us about how they use Linux there. Yeah, so you said, Angel, that you kind of over the last 5 years, your skills had really improved. Was there any particular reason? What was going on?
I think getting involved with the ARM architecture, getting more involved, like building. I like to build a lot of the packages that Willie puts out. A lot of his Slack builds for like Mate or Mate desktop, which is one of my favorite desktops. And I just, I don't know how to explain it. I just love to tinker around. I get in trouble with my wife and be like, "Hey, are you done yet on the computer? Because you're constantly working on something." And it's just how my brain works. It's almost like a tool. Like I have to keep working on it to sharpen, keep my skills sharpened. I think the frustrating part for me is that the technology the industry is moving really rapidly. There's all these new things coming up, but I can't keep up. Like, containers are good, and no, they're not good, and yes, they are, and and then you start with a Docker, and then Podman comes out, and Red Hat 8 now says, no, we're going to go with Podman, because I just learned, Docker. So, that's a frustrating thing, that things are moving. Some things are just moving at a rapid rate, and it is really hard to keep up. Of course, that's all industry driven. In the government world, we don't migrate things very fast. We're very slow. I mean, we're just about to implement virtualization. So that's how slow.
Wow.
Yeah, we're, the government in general, they don't like to lead they want something that is established and
They're not pioneering,
tested.
that's for sure.
Yeah, no, they're not pioneering at all. They want something that is,
adopters.
yeah, they want something that is established, that's been tried and true, and it works, and it's reliable. They don't want anything, anything that starts to get too complex. You run the risk of training. What could go wrong? You got too many things that could go wrong, and in a system that is mission critical, you want to minimize that.
Yeah.
So, but that has been my frustration.
Well, yeah, that's actually one of the things that I prefer about Slackware than something like Red Hat, where you go and learn it and then it's changed again in 3 years. With the enterprise, I know Phil and I have talked about this, although not on the podcast, but we talked about this before, where when you go to a company, unless you're actually going to a Linux vendor or something like that, it's not really so much about the technology. It's more about what it is that you can bring to the party. Because at the end of the day, the company's got, okay, we've got some servers. I don't really know what they do. Don't really care. They do something, and there's a job opening. Are you going to be the one or not? You could start learning lots of technology, but as you said, it's always going to keep changing. And most of the time, the companies they want something that's established, because you can't afford to keep ripping it out every few years. But then, if you're going to commit to going in, like for example, did you hear of it was Zen, wasn't it? XEN. That was the predecessor to KVM. It wasn't a predecessor, but it was a different virtualization technology. And then Red Hat switched from Zen to KVM when they bought the company that made KVM. For example, at Red Hat, I learned Zen because that's what was in Red Hat, or in RHEL 3 or 4 at the time, or 5. And then they're like, okay, we switched to KVM. Oh, so we've set up a load of Puppet and whatnot to go and do Zen, to work with Zen, and now it's just not in the distribution anymore.
Right.
Excellent. Good use of time.
That is very frustrating. And then, of course, we went from ext, the file system, ext3, and I was like, oh no, now it's ext4. It's like, okay, so one of those upgrades, we had to migrate our file system from ext3 to ext4, and now it's nope, XFS. I'm like, oh, come on, Although I do prefer. I find, of course, I have to sit down and actually do some real testing, but in my experience, I find XFS to be a lot faster than ext4, especially if you're doing a lot of database transactions or things like that, it's a lot more efficient. But I've put all my systems with XFS and it seems to be working pretty good. The only bad thing is you can't shrink the file system. You can expand it, but you can't shrink it. So that's a pretty big drawback. But nowadays, I don't know why you want to shrink the file system nowadays. But yeah, that's my main frustration is how moving forward, where do I draw the line? There's only so much time I have between tinkering and learning something new, and it's like, okay, where do I stop? Because I don't want to spend time learning this to then be completely superseded the following year. It's a little bit frustrating. I know.
That problem exists. It's not just in this. This exists in my type of work as well. I've spoken to people that work at AWS, Amazon Web Services, and they have the same thing. They keep bringing out new features and new products, that you can use as a service, and then you expect all of the consultants to just know to keep learning it all, and somehow hold and still, because they keep the old AWS keep the old services around for a while as well. You can't just cut them off.
Right.
Then so basically people need to continuously the range of things that they need to keep learning and still have a reasonable idea about it keeps growing, and you don't really get the time to go and research that stuff and really play with it to be particularly great at consulting. It's you can't be particularly great at consulting if you don't play with it.
Right.
There's a limit to the abstraction that you can just make up in your mind to actually go, well, I know it's going to work because I've tried it. You don't have these reference points if you don't really play around with it. You need to play around with it to get reference points, to get a feel for what the system can do as well. So, that kind of problem, that knowing where to stop learning is quite a difficult thing, actually.
Right, and like System D is a very is a good example. Is like when it was rolled out, you had to learn the quirks of how to troubleshoot it when I know it's just like, oh my gosh, like it's you restart a service, you don't get output back because okay, did it work? And then you read, it's like, yes, if you don't get an output, it means it worked. Or if you don't get an output after you run your command, but it has its own quirks, and it takes time, like to kind of figure it out how to properly troubleshoot the system, learning why certain things don't work and why things die and you have to restart the service, all these things. And I understand why they went with System D. It helps standardize the field, especially for the corporate world. That's a big deal, and it is nice in that regards that you can go from a Red Hat system to a Debian system, and they use System D, and you can very easily work with the system. Like before, you had an int-D with Red Hat, but Debian had its own way of doing things that was confusing as heck if you never used Debian before. So, I understand why they standardized it, but, I'm just glad that Slackware, they're just adding PAM. So I don't worry that System D is going to be around Slackware anytime soon. Although I have built what is it called? How do you say it? D instead of Slackware, Slackware, I guess, with a D, where System D was Slackware.
I've not seen it, but I've seen mentions of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a project. Yeah, and I've built it on a virtual machine, and it was a good exercise because I kind of have an understanding of if you ever want to revert back from System D in Slackware to the original in its system, I know how to do that. But it's just so complicated in some ways. It's easy in some ways, but in others, like, it's just more work.
Yeah, what does it really get you anyway?
Right. And it's funny because it used to be like you can start the system, a System D system is supposed to be fast, but I have found lately that on my laptop, Fedora took longer to boot than Slackware. Slackware on my SSD drive, I have an SSD drive on the laptop, it boot it up in less than 10 seconds. And with Fedora, I'm sitting there 20 seconds. I'm like, come on, man, really? This is supposed to be the fast boot, and now it's become slow. You know, troubleshooting things can be a pain sometimes because it, like every now and then there'll be an issue with NFS, and it happens to us at work sometimes on a reboot. NFS doesn't cleanly close, and it'll just hang. And it's just like, oh, come on. But it won't tell you, it's not clear as to what exactly is timing out. It's just saying, oh, I'm timing out. And it's like, why are you timing out? Give me some information here. So, man, it's one of those things where you have to learn the quirks and where to look for how to troubleshoot the system.
So that's what keeps you with Slackware, is it? You said because you keep coming back.
Yeah, yes. Trust. It's my old trusty operating system. I know it's gonna work. I like how it's Linux, how and whatever's in there is provided how the developers of those projects meant it for you to have it without any patches. I mean, there are some patches in order to build, but without having to have any major modifications. I like that. One time I looked at the Slackware, not the Slackware kernel, but the Red Hat kernel, the source package, and I was just in awe of how many patch files go into the kernel because they roll everything back. So if you ever look at a source at the spec file for the kernel, it's like, oh my gosh, hundreds and hundreds of patches.
I've seen them in the past.
It's brutal. I'm like, how can you? I mean, it's not really. I know it's like Red Hat 8 is kernel 3.0, but it's really not 3.0. It's just this monstrosity of all these parts of other kernels put into this version. It's not the same 3.0 that you will go to from kernel.org and download it. It's just, and they have to do that. They have to backport features and, hardware drivers and all of that. They have to back,
there are some cases actually where that they've done that for specific customers, just because the customer doesn't want to upgrade. So they sort of pay a lot of money to have their not a custom channel, but we'll pay you a lot of money. You keep updating that version of that.
Yes.
So that happens quite a lot as well, more than I would have thought it would actually. But then again, when you realise how you've got these enormous estates of servers everywhere, upgrading them is, no insignificant task.
No, I'm already dreading having to upgrade to the next version here next year, because it's just, at least this time around, it won't be as significant because Red Hat 6 to 7 was very significant. Red Hat 7 to 8 is not, other than changing Yum to DNF. Even though you use Yum still works. It's really a symbolic link to DNF, but it doesn't seem to be as dramatic. Like going from the going to System D, that was pretty dramatic change for a lot of people because we were using service whatever.
Service, that's right.
Yeah, the service command. So at least it won't be. Well, it shouldn't be that bad, but we'll see.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah.
What led you to look at ARM devices? What have you got?
The first time I found out about him, Robby, our workman, Robby Workman, he came into my house and he had I think it was called a SheevaPlug. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
Yeah, that's a SheevaPlug, right?
Yeah, so he had a SheevaPlug. I mean, we were just playing around for hours, and he showed me this device, and it's like, what the heck is that? He's like, oh, it's an ARM device. I'm like, what the heck is an ARM device? But back then they were not like, really they took off when the mobile phone, took off. But I didn't know anything about these devices, and really it wasn't until I remember that I was like, oh, that's great, but I kind of didn't really explore it any further until probably when Android came around and I started figuring out, oh, these are ARM platforms. And I started wondering, well, can I put Slackware on this thing? I was like, no, you really can't. It doesn't work like that. But then I started finding out all these. I think that's when at some point the Raspberry Pi came out. That's a $35 computer. That's what I remember.
Mhm.
It's like, what, a 35, what? The size of a credit card. And that's how I ended up starting getting involved. And that was several years ago. I got my first one. And I still have some Raspberry Pi 2s, and I use those to work on my I do my own camera system, so they run motion. I don't trust a lot of the camera systems that you can buy off the shelf that you can connect from the internet. I can
Right.
VPN to my house, and then I can view the
Mm.
cameras that way. That way I know that nobody else can get in.
Oh, what you're using is like a CCTV or door for your front door or something.
Yeah, what I do is the program is called Motion, and what I did is I use Apache. I just wrote an HTML page with a
Mhm.
simple line saying go to the link, because part of the Motion service has a plugin like a HTTP. You can connect via HTTP on a port,
Mhm.
and you can write the code to actually. It's just a simple page, and it just shows you the live stream, whatever the camera is
Oh,
seeing at
okay.
the time. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Actually, what I do is I make like 1 frame a second for the preview, but when it detects motion, it records at full 30 frames per second, and it's pretty cool. I mean, it's what I do is I from the Pis, they send the files to an NFS server, and then from the NFS server, they get sent to the web server locally, and that's how I view them. And then I have a script that at the end of the day, at midnight, it cleans up the files and puts them in a backup, and then it creates a new directory for the day. So
Oh,
it's
okay.
pretty neat. I have control of all of it. Nobody can go from the outside from the internet and get into my system. So yeah, that's one of the things I use the Raspberries with the camera module.
Oh, I was going to just ask you, is it a USB one connected or is it a kind
Yeah,
of?
just a little camera module. You can use a USB one, but the camera module, that's what I like to use.
Oh, cool. Have you
And
got all
that's
that
how,
running off Raspberry Pi?
yeah, and
Cool.
they've been running. It's pretty cheap because they're like 30-40 bucks, and when they
Mm.
die, I just swap them out and put a new one in, especially if they're outside. Eventually the weather will get to them, or
Oh, well, you've got.
bugs.
Oh, right. Have you got them like in a waterproof box or something, or
Yeah, I get
made
them
plastic?
they're covered, but eventually if it gets too
Ah,
hot or if it gets too cold,
the
eventually,
humidity's.
yeah, the
Yeah, that's not
humidity,
good.
the components eventually will die.
Yeah.
And so far the last one that died was maybe about a year ago, and the one that I've had in there is still kicking. So um, it's been working okay. I put in heat sinks too to help at least regulate the processor, preventing them from getting too hot. But
Okay.
that's how I got started, and I now again it's my inner thirst of building things, of like, for example, like, can I build Chromium? Do I need Chromium? No, but I just want to know that can I build this thing? It's just almost like a challenge. It's like, can I do this? Yes, let's figure
Have you
it out.
succeeded? Have you done
No,
it? Oh.
well, the way I'm using Alien's Slack build, and you have to modify it because it's written obviously for x86 and x86 64. And there's something I was able to build. The way he has it, you have to build Clang from Google's version of Clang and then use that to build Chromium. But I was not being successful. I was able to build Clang, and then we'll get about not even a quarter in with Chromium, and it will fail because some whatever reason. So
Mm.
I started looking at Arc, the Arc packages and how they build it, and I just saw that they have a package available for their not their for their 32-bit ARM device. So I'm like, well, if they have it, there's got to be a way. So I see that they have some patches some custom patches and some different arguments to build it. So I'm gonna give that a try. It's just so slow. I mean, it's a very long process to build Chromium. You have to, like, a lot of times I just bypass the untarring and tarring and removing the directory and tarring it up or whatever, because it just takes too much time. So it's, but I'm gonna get it. I'm gonna get it done. I don't know how long it's gonna take me, but I'm gonna be successful one day.
Wow. Yeah, it really does though. When you've got massive packages, it takes absolutely ages, and if it breaks, it could be soul destroying. It's like 2 days in, you're like, it's still going, and then it breaks, and then you've already fixed it 2 days before, and you start it again, and it takes even longer, and it breaks.
It's like, no, it's very that's where you're like, you start thinking, why am I doing this? And then you stop, I stop, and then a couple of days later, after the frustration kind of goes away, okay, let's try this again with fresh set of eyes. Why did it fail? So now I don't know how really much of a difference it makes, but I use icecream to do the builds, and in some packages I think that makes it slower, because what happens is icecream knows, one thing I like it is because it knows how many processors each machine has, and it can distribute accordingly. But the problem is that the original source where you're executing the compiling, eventually it has to come back, and then it has to process that whatever was compiled, and I think that's slowing it down in some cases. But where it does help is you're not going to run out of memory as easy, because you're sending.
It depends what you do, because does icecream surely doesn't do linking, does it?
No, don't know. So it's
It could do, but it probably doesn't know, because you need a cross compiler. You need to.
Yes, it does, because I ran the same script that the stuff you created, the X tool chain. So I ran that, but instead of using it for dist cc, there's something you have to do. You have to create you run an argument with icc, and it creates a zip file. And then when you create a zip file, like you run that command on the 64-bit machine, and then you take that zip file and send it into the ARM device, and then from there you say, I want to use these libraries, and then it knows what to do. So it does help, and I think at least Chromium is going to take a long time to build, and a lot of times you're going to run out of memory. But with 4 gigabytes, hopefully that'll help.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that, because I didn't know that it did linking, because that's with this CC it doesn't. It only does compiling. And actually, I was thinking the other day that I need to add in CLang or Clang, as you call it. I've never heard anyone call it Clang before. That I need to add that in, because I don't have that with my disk CC setup. I might look at that with Slackware 15. I haven't tried to get the newer version of CLang to compile yet, because my build system runs Slackware 64 14.2. I mean, my servers where that run DiskCC run that, so I haven't tried to get. But
and I know icecream supports Clang.
Oh yeah, DiskCC. Well, you still have to have Clang to output the ARM target though, so we still have to do that. Which I think the Slackware one does by default. Actually, I think the build script builds for. I think it builds ARM target support. I'd have to check actually. I haven't tested it, but I think it does. But if icecream can do linking, that's really good, because DiskCC doesn't. So what happens as well sometimes here is that if the way my DiskCC setup works, it just checks how many systems are available on the network locally that have a DiskCC port open, and then it just assumes that that's working. And then so it just calculates how many cores are on each machine, and then just sets the number of jobs, the -j parameter. It could be say 24 or something, which is usually fine, apart from some packages. If you have make -j24 on an ARM box, it tries to do all this linking afterwards, and it just completely fails. So I have to tune it down to just nproc. So it just runs. It only has to say, for example, make j4 on Orange Pi because that's how many cores it has. So I tend to reduce it down for so I still get the benefits of cross compiling, but I don't. But the build system doesn't go constantly sit in swap or something like that, which would like triple the amount of time that it would take to build otherwise. So I found that going on quite a few times.
And that's what mprox does. That mproc argument.
nproc just returns a number of
okay.
Yeah. So you do like make -j, open up an nproc and then get the output with it. So you don't have to hard code the number of processors on your build script. You just do it dynamically.
Oh, okay.
Because that way you can't really overload the machine if it's running. If you've got the number of parallel jobs equal to the number of cores. So you're not really going to overload the machine that way. But I'll have to look at that if icecream does linking, because I might have to switch it, because that would help with some packages.
Yeah, but now I'm not sure.
I'll look at later on about that.
I'll let you. You're more of an expert than I am on that.
Yeah, I'll look at that later on actually, because if it does, that would help significantly. Because particularly things like I had to get SeaMonkey wasn't compiling again the other day, so I had to merge in all of the hacks from Firefox to get that thing to build. So that got that building, and it works. I wasn't sure. Sometimes I'm never really sure. It actually did compile and it ran, so I was quite pleased about that. Wow. So you use? Do you test a lot of the scripts from slackbuilds.org then on ARM or?
Oh yeah. Like I just built built a Mate desktop and it works really well. I'm constantly like right now I'm trying to build a Blender and to see if a Blender. My son works. I mean, he loves Blender. He's always working on something. So now I'm like, yeah, I wonder if I can build Blender. So I'm failing on ARM. Yes, I'm failing on Valgrind. That package. It seems to be having a problem getting to the configure script handling the ARM. Is saying, oh nope, CPU is not. It's not. ARM is not available to be used, but it is. You just have to hack the configure script. So, but yeah, I mean, I built MAME, the main emulator.
Emulator, yeah.
Yeah, and it worked just fine. So yeah, just like what else can I do? So I'm constantly just throwing in stuff in there. And
so when you say Blender, do you mean that the 3D kind of animation?
Yeah, the 3D rendering. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wait, 3D rendering. Wouldn't you want to run that on ARM? Are you mad?
I don't know. Now.
Let me know how it goes. I'm really good.
The Blender has there's a program called it's a render farm, and I can't remember now the exact name. Crowd render. That's what it's called. It's a plugin written in Python, and what it does is you can run the plugin. You can have a Blender program open in all your machines, and it will connect. You open Blender where you're going to be working on your project, and when you're getting ready to render the whatever project you have, it goes across all the machines that have Blender running. So basically doing a render farm of Blender, and it really makes a big difference.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, so that will be something where you can have the client be ARM, but do the rendering in a farm. And
yes, okay.
Yeah, that will be very useful. That way the original machine can be a little bit under power with no issues, but then run the farm, render with the farm. But I'm not sure if it's going to work or not. So I'll let you know if it does.
Yeah, let me know. It's worth giving it a go. I'm interested to see how Chromium pans out as well. I mean, I know I've got Firefox. Well, that's in Slackware ARM, so that works. And so does evidently SeaMonkey. But I think that's actually the full range of browser. No, yeah, that's pretty much it.
There's Vivaldi. How do you say that?
Oh, I mean that's in Slackware.
Yeah, there's a ARM version. I think I do run it and it works. There's a third option, and it's based off Chromium basically. You just don't build it from source. It's already compiled.
Okay. Well, so are you actually using it as a desktop of any kind then, or you? I know you've got your.
I have like right now I have a little screen. It's a touch screen. I can't get the touch screen to work with my Raspberry 4. I don't know why, but I do have a sort of like, for example, like I have a Raspberry Pi 3 with a touch screen, and I have the browser open with the cameras in full screen. So
Oh,
basically works like a security, you know, constantly looking at the cameras. Um, and so just stuff like that. It's still not my main, like a main desktop, but I have used it. I think it's getting now to the point that you can use it as a desktop. Especially I bought today a ROG 64.
oh
Um,
right.
yeah, and it's a 4 GB, but the cool part is the processor, the network, and the USB bus, they're all actually separate component, unlike the
Ah,
Raspberry,
right.
where you have a gigabit Ethernet, but you're not
Yeah.
going to get a gigabit. This actually you will get a gigabit, and it has a PCI Express slot, so you can put a
Oh,
little adapter, and you can put actually a true SSD drive. That's if it works the way I think it's going to work, that's going to be a big deal because you can very easily build packages, uh, because it'll be just like a regular desktop. So I'm curious how that's gonna work. And of course, it's 64-bit only.
mm,
So I'll have to grab. I know on Linux questions, there's someone that's been maintaining at least a mini root, and be able to get a baseline system to go from there. So I'm looking forward to. That's my next project. Build packages for Arch 64.
yeah, that sounds really cool. I'd like to be able to do that myself, but I can't use a machine that's greater than ARM v7 to build packages, sadly,
Oh,
in case
yeah,
it messes the packages up.
yeah. So this will be a complete,
Yeah.
and again, this is just for myself to learn, and just be more familiar with the process of building the operating system itself. And like I still not very familiar with like a mini root environment, and like just getting started from a bare system. I want to learn. That's my next thing, but just finding time, that's the hard part.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, it shouldn't be too. The mini root really is just it's just extracted Slackware packages. It's basically I just did it so it's just the base that you would need. Well, I would need to boot a system to bootstrap a new. Actually, no, what did I build it for? Oh, well, yeah, I built the mini root systems because when I was still adding support for new ARM devices to Slackware ARM, I used to have to rsync loads of a live operating system onto another disk and then
Uh-huh.
boot it onto another machine. That was just took ages. So I thought I would just build a script to just extract the packages I need, and then which would be a couple hundred megabytes, and
Uh,
then just put it on
gotcha.
there and boot it. So that's basically all it does. It doesn't have a compiler or anything. I don't know if um, the one you're referring to, Slarm64, is that
Yeah,
the
that
one?
one.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
I've not. I know the mini root script is based on the one that I put out, but I don't know if it's got much else in there. But it doesn't have a compiler or anything. But the point is that you can boot the system. It's got some network support, so you can go and download stuff and then get going with it. So you could add
Yeah,
in all the packages you wanted.
yeah. That's
Uh,
that's what I want to learn. If I wanted to get a fully supported, uh, how do you say
mhm.
Arc? Arc, is it Arc
uh,
or Arch? Arc
don't
64.
know. I mean, I'd say because
Arc.
it's got two A's in it. It just sounds like you've got a stammer,
Right.
Arc 64. I don't know. Arc,
And
Arc.
so yeah, so I want to learn that process, and again, it's just kind of for fun to see how, just you know just add
Yeah.
another, just my curiosity, how, and to learn, just kind of see how to do it. And then if
It,
I do figure it out, then put packages out for other people, because these devices they're gonna keep getting more popular.
yeah, they are, aren't they? I mean, did you take so did you get your Raspberry Pi installed with SARPi that Phil puts
Yes,
out?
yes, I do.
Ah,
It is really neat. And the the Raspberry Pi 4 is quite amazing. I mean, they've come a long way from the RPI 1 and the 2 and then now the 4. I never thought that we're going to actually get beyond the 2 gigabyte memory, or not even 2, the 1 gigabyte. That was always the deal breaker of like, man, compiling stuff with 1 gigabyte of RAM is really hard. So having 4 gigabytes, that's a big difference. There's still a bottleneck of you're going through it's not even even a eMMC module. It's it's that little memory. What is it called? The micro SD. I think that's even though it's fast, it's still a choke point when you're trying to build packages. It can't.
Oh yeah, I mean you couldn't port.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't. I mean, no, my systems have either SSD with eSATA or it's a USB attached hard drive. And that's pretty much preferably eSATA. But
yeah. So I'm looking forward to the Rock 64 because you can do a lot faster stuff. We'll see in theory.
Yeah, it's getting me excited now. So I'm thinking about that. Because the ARM v7 stuff doesn't have any. There aren't machines that have, or if there are, I haven't seen them, or they're really expensive, one of the two.
Right.
To do that, it'd be quite nice to be able to build a machine that has a PCI slot in it, or a few really, and you can put whatever boards you want in there, as long as they're supported. But most of them would be.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. Maybe in the future I'll do that when I've got some free time, but that's not now.
No, that's a challenge. Finding time, having a family and working during the week. It just the playtime is really hard to come by. And I used to do a lot of the work at night, but now I'm like I get up really early, so I just go to bed early. So,
yeah, that's the thing. That's also one of the reasons why I don't support as much stuff as I would have done or used to do, because it's not. It just takes a lot of time to actually test things and then document it. It just doesn't really pan out in the end. You have to kind of reduce what you're doing down to a smaller number. And if someone else wants to deal with something else, they can go and do that, which is what they've done. In the case of Phil's, brought Slackware ARM to the Raspberry Pi, and here you are.
Yeah, yep. So we'll see. It should be about a week or two before I get the parts. So, and then we'll go from there. I'll keep you all informed.
Yeah, I look forward to it. So you were talking about something before I joined, weren't you? What you were talking about before we started the podcast?
I think we were talking about the Rock 64.
Oh yeah, I see.
I think Phil and I were talking about that.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I just came in and had a look. We managed to get Skype working. Yeah, I'm impressed with Skype. It's pretty good actually in terms of recording anyway. Although I'm not sure if Google Hangouts would be any better, but don't know. I haven't used that for a long time either.
We use it. We use Google Hangouts at work a lot, and it works pretty good. I mean, you can get a good amount of people in a conference, and you can share your desktop. And it works. I was actually pretty.
Oh right, that's pretty good.
Yeah, you can either if you have a camera, you can share your camera, or you share your desktop. So you can do a presentation from your desktop. So that's kind of.
Oh, neat. I see. There's quite a few of these tools, isn't there, around that do that now?
Yeah, oh yeah. It's come a long way, because back even 5 years ago, just to get stuff like that working on Linux was very difficult.
Yeah, that's true. It's a lot easier now actually to use a Linux desktop because of things like Flash. And actually, that was one of the things I realized recently, well, a few months ago, when I started doing some of the testing for Slackware ARM to do with the desktops. I rebuilt loads of stuff as I started testing the desktop, and I realized that you can actually browse the web now, because it doesn't. Many of the websites I would go to don't use Flash anymore. So a lot of these impediments to, because Flash did exist on ARM actually. There was a binary for it. There was but you wouldn't really want to do that. But it did work. But now the websites don't have that. Most of the websites don't use Flash anymore. So you can do a lot more just with Firefox. So it's quite good actually that you can. Because my plan eventually still is to try and migrate onto using the ARM platform as my desktop.
Yes, that's. Mm-hmm.
because it should be fast enough to do. I mean, it runs KDE 4. It's not too. It's actually reasonably snappy, even though I kind of expected not to be, but it actually is on my Orange Pi anyway. But if I go back to something else like Window Maker, it's even better.
Right. And that's, I think for people that, may just want just a browser and just simple stuff, it's great. It's a computer that you can have for less than $100. You really can't beat that. It's low powered. So yeah, I think that's going to be eventually, especially with all the Intel processor stuff that, all the vulnerabilities that have come out, that's a thing for me. ARM devices have a benefit where they're not that we know of, at least they're not exploited with the same bugs, or they don't have the same backdoors.
The ARM was, though. I remember, because it was affected, if I remember rightly.
But it was not. I don't think it was a level. Maybe I'm wrong. But I knew there were some issues, but it was not to the level that, because even AMD also was affected.
Yeah, because it was to do with the way that it preemptively, I think it basically guessed what the next instruction would be or where it was or something. I can't remember the details. I did look at them at the time, but then there was no, because I kept looking, because when that vulnerability was coming out, I was looking to see what I needed to do for Slackware ARM, and there was basically nothing you could do as far as I could tell. So I was like, well, okay, if there's anything in the kernel, there's nothing coming in the kernel, so okay, but apparently the architecture was still vulnerable to that attack, but I never actually saw anything that was really going to fix it. There was something to do with NetFilter, but there was some kind of module called BC. It wasn't BCF or BCP or something. I can't remember now. Berkeley something or other. And I looked at that and I was like, really? Okay. Well, I must have been completely wrong. I don't know. I remember looking at it, but I mean, I suppose in some respects though, you've got. Not that you really want to use security through obscurity, but there is some element of that there with ARM as well, isn't there?
Yeah, but in the end, it's still just a cheap computer that now you can do a lot of things, and they're only going to get better. They're going to get faster. They're going to increase the RAM, and hopefully the price is not going to jump too high. They're very convenient. They're a little tiny thing, So for most people, that may be just enough.
Yeah, I suppose. I don't know how many users. Phil and I were talking about this the other day. Are you still there, Phil?
Yeah, mate.
You've got an icon. Okay, I can see there's an icon.
One of the things I'm looking into is the Rock64 on Slackware. And on the pine64.org website for the operating system downloads, they actually have an image for Arch64. So maybe that's something you'll want to look into, Angel.
Yeah, I'll look into it. And I have a feeling that I'm gonna have to poke some stuff out of that to kind of get going. Yeah. So they have a laptop, but it was out of stock.
It's always interesting to see what other people are doing, apart from what Stuart does, because that's what I consider the official proper Slackware ARM. I'm really interested in what other people do with it, especially when they're distributing it as an installer or an OS, or this is a mini root. So I'd be interested in seeing just how much disparity there is between this and Stuart's work, or if there is any at all. So that's just my personal interest. But it's really interesting that you're getting involved in other devices than the Raspberry Pi. Just one thing I've got to say is, if your touch screen isn't working, which kernel are you using with that?
Say that again. Which one?
Your Raspberry Pi 4. You said your touch screen isn't working.
Yes, it's the. Let me do uname.char. 5.418.
Right. Now that did contain a problem with the touchscreen. There's an update to 5.4.22, I think, which should fix it. So you might want to update to that kernel.
I will. I actually saw that today. I was at work and I saw that. I was like, "Oh, there's a new kernel," and then I got distracted and I never installed it. So I'll go ahead and do that, and I'll let you know.
Yeah, good. With the 5.4 branch not being the development, well, it is the test development. It's not the running kernel branch, so there are going to be things in there that don't work.
Gotcha.
I have it on good authority that there are problems with the kernel source in the Raspberry Pi repository, and they're just working real hard to fix them. So just a matter of time.
Okay. Sounds good. I will let you know.
Good stuff.
I appreciate it. Doing all this work. I've been, over the last year or two with the Raspberry Pi. I've been, and same with you, Stuart. I mean, like the work that you guys have done has been pretty good, and I'm very thankful for that. And I'm sure other people are too.
Yeah. I feel Stuart said the same thing, but I feel like a cheater. I really do. Listening.
By the time of the spots, I thought.
Yeah. Listening to what you said about the what you've learned and the way you've learned it. Me and Stuart's had this conversation quite a few times, and I think because Slackware is designed the way that it is, you either learn and know what you're doing or you don't do it. And I think that assists you in many, many other areas of computing, not just Linux, but it gives you the mindset of problem solving and troubleshooting and investigating. And it really is an experience that shouldn't be missed. And I often say that Slackware is the greatest tool by which to learn Linux, because there is nothing else in comparison. It really is great for that reason alone.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
And definitely, I mean, it allowed me to switch from a career of being a forecaster to actually working with computers. My degree is still in meteorology. This was all self-taught over the course of 10 years, even though I've been using Linux for 20, but the 10 year that I really had to work hard, because I said I like computers more than I like forecasting in the weather. And I knew what I had to do. So it took me 10 years, buying books, learning, scouring the internet, and learning command line things, begging my boss to let me buy more books or send me to a class here and there. And little by little over time, I got to what I'm doing now. So in a lot of that, I have to attribute to Slackware, because it taught me how to, like you were saying, properly troubleshoot, how to troubleshoot the system, problem solving. It was just a brain practice, practicing how to do these things. And then when I have the job now, it just comes natural to me.
Yeah, I think that's how it works. I remember when I started out, there was the actual way I got into Red Hat, or rather into Linux, was because I was on IRC with my Acorns. The ARM, the strong ARM, well, and before that, my Acorn was on IRC on a Riscos channel, and some of the guys there were running Linux and ISPs and stuff like that. And one of the guys happened to live where I used to live, near Coventry, in the UK, and he said, "Oh, I can install Linux on I had a PC, spare PC for someone." He said, "Oh, I can install Linux on there." I'm like, "Okay, great. What's that?" So anyway, so I went around to his house and he installed Red Hat, some old like Red Hat 4 or something on there. And it's great because you boot it up and you log in like this. But once you log in, I mean, what do you actually do? I mean, there's just some words on the screen with a flashing prompt. And even though I was used to using command lines from the BBC Micro and the Acorn as well, I was used to using command lines, but I didn't know what they were on there. And you don't really know where to start. So you just have to ask. I used to ask lots of people on IRC, how do you do this basic thing? And at one point, one guy one of my friends would make a kernel for me. He'd compile a kernel with the support I needed, with like the NE2000 driver for the network and all this sort of stuff. And I'd have a really, really small monolithic kernel. And then eventually I ended up learning how to build my own ones for the x86, which was actually, I've got to say, it was actually quite a lot of work. Now it's kind of, but yeah, it was a lot of work to do it because I didn't know what anything meant. I was supposed to know, what all this hardware was. I never even heard of half of it. Yeah. And I remember one of the guys at one of the computing clubs I used to go to. Well, it's more of a drinking beer club, to be honest, in Coventry. And one of these guys was also a Slackware user. He said that you talked about he used to compile kernels, Angel, and this guy he did the same. And he said that he used to he'd set his kernel compiling on his 386, and then he'd set an alarm clock in the middle of the night to wake him up to type make modules. And then he said, yeah, but you know what happened after a while? I realised I could do make make modules. So he didn't have to wake up at 3 a.m. He said he'd been doing it for years. He set an alarm clock so he could wake up and type make modules to sleep again.
Oh, that's funny. It's to this day, even after 20 years using Linux, I am still learning new tricks that I'm like I just learned not long ago, bash substitution on the command line. You can do the caret and then the first, whatever the word you want to find, and then do another caret, and then the word that you wanted to replace. I was in a Red Hat class, and the guy did that. I'm like, whoa, it blew my mind. I'm like, can you show me that again? What did you just do? Like, if you type a really long command, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but bash allows you to, as long as it's on the previous command, you just do the caret top.
Oh, the up arrow, yeah.
Yeah, I just learned that, and it's like, so there's always something out there that I'm like, it just blows my mind. I'm like, what?
I'm going to blow your mind then if I tell you to press Control and R. And then start typing, because that gives you the reverse search through the history. So you can do Control and R, LS or whatever.
Oh my gosh!
And then you can do Control and R. You can press Control and R again. It will cycle through what it finds next.
Oh wow! And how do you quit? Control C, I guess.
Just Control C, yeah.
Control R and then Control R again.
Yeah, so you press, you can see on the screen what it does, and then you can press return if you want to execute it, and if not, press Control and R to find the one you want. So when I SSH into machines, I SSH space, and then it'd be like whatever's last in the history, and I'll just cycle through until I find the server I want to SSH to, and just whack return. But you can also do.
Oh wow! Okay, so SSH and Control. Whoa.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really useful. I use it all the time. To the reverse.
Oh, nice.
But you can also do yanking from the. You can do so if you do say, like echo foo on the screen. Type echo space foo, and you can do Control and W to delete the last line, to delete the word, and then type echo U, and then put Control and Y, and then you paste.
Oh yeah, I see that.
So you can yank from what you cut out, and you can yank it back. So you can actually have a sort of semblance of. Text editing in a way just directly on the shell. So it's quite useful, for example, if you type something in IRC, for example, sometimes I'll write some really long sentence and then realize it's just a load of waffle and then do Control and W, and then I realize, and so I can delete it, then I can put something in front of it to make it make more sense, and then do Control and Y to yank it back again, so I don't have to kind of assemble it. Else I can assemble it on the I think it's part of readline. It's one of the features of readline, I think. So yeah, you can do that. You can do loads of those kinds of.
Wow! How about that? See, there you go. That's I think one thing that has allowed me to be successful in my job for the most part is having the mindset that I don't know everything, and someone else has always something to bring to the table. So whether it's a new person coming in or someone experienced or whatever, learn from them. Like, don't just because they're new or they're new to the agency. Oh, I'm not gonna listen to you. You're just rookie. No, they always have something to bring to the table, and like I will teach you what I know, and if you got something to share, hey, I'll bring it in. That's great too, and that has allowed me to expand my knowledge throughout the years.
Yeah, it's always like that, isn't it? I mean, it's like I remember when I started at Red Hat, one of my mentor there, didn't, I'd come along and say, well, you can just, I'd see something he'd write in shell script, and I'd say, you could just do that with one command, with grep-c. You don't need to pipe it into all this stuff. And it's like, really? So it's like, man, oh yeah, so you can, because you learn it in an old system that doesn't have these newer features in the, in the software, and you're not going to go and reread all the man pages, are you, to see what's changed?
Right.
It
Nope.
just doesn't happen. No one does that unless you actually, to be fair, I sometimes do. If I'm writing a script that I'm going to, actually, this is quite funny. This is one of the differences, but I don't know if anyone kind of else does that. But when you're writing a script, for example, the build system for Slackware ARM has never been designed to be published anywhere. So it's not written in a way. The approach I've written it with is not for distribution. So there's things in there that are a bit hacky. There's things in there that I wouldn't, it requires quite a bit of work to put it out. So that's not going to happen. But it also means that when I'm writing some code, I'm like, I know how to hack it. I'll just hack it like this. Whereas if it's good for distribution, I'll go and actually read the man page if I can't figure out, if it's not obvious how to do something, in case there is a new option. So I go and make sure to try and make the command as succinct as possible so it runs faster. So I do actually put the effort in to go and look to see whether whether there's a better way of doing stuff. But other than that, I never do, because it's just no point, is there? You might as well just, at the end of the day, if it takes 1 extra second to run, you don't really care, do you?
Right.
I mean, there is a limit to what you can do. So it's quite nice when you get other people who come in with just, even if it's quite small things, I didn't know that had changed.
Right. Yep. I enjoy it. I always enjoy learning something new. It's like, oh, great. Now I know I can save some time.
So do you have any sort of, at one point, some of us had talked about going to Self. Is that right? What it's called?
Self, yes. It's actually in Charlotte, and I'm only an hour and a half away. So I think I talked to Robby. I think he may be going this year. I know Pat went one time several years ago. He actually did show up. But I will try. I missed it last year. By the time I figured out that they were going to have it, I had something that weekend I couldn't go. But I'm hoping to go this year, assuming the whole thing with the coronavirus doesn't,
Oh.
Yeah, because Red Hat canceled their summit in San Francisco.
Yeah, the company I work for canceled our thing as well. Everyone's doing it.
Yeah, I was supposed to actually go to DC this weekend for work, and that got canceled.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we'll see. Hopefully things will come down.
Hopefully, yeah. Apparently pandemics will normally last about 8 weeks. My customers are asking vendors what business continuity plans, what are your BCPs for this? And I found out that pandemics tend to last about 8 weeks.
Yeah, I'm hoping that by the summer it's going to be over with. Hopefully.
Yeah. I remember when the SARS happened, actually, I went to New Zealand, and I was coming back from New Zealand via Hong Kong, I think, or Singapore, something like that. And that's when the SARS virus was there. So all these people with masks, I was thinking, what's going on? Why are all these people wearing masks?
With masks?
and then I had to change. That's right. I changed at Singapore for a few hours or something, and as they got off the airplane, everybody was subjected to a heat monitor. So basically, they got this big machine like staring at you, and you could see on the screen, all of your face with the heat map of, on your face. And I was like, oh God, I hope they let me on. I hope I'm not caught something.
Oh, and yeah, that's terrible. Are y'all gonna try and make it to Self or whatever it's called?
No,
I wouldn't be able to.
It's expensive.
Yeah, I couldn't justify going to the US. Maybe if somebody else pays for it, I could do that. But other than that, no. I was just curious whether there was local computer clubs or anything like that, because I used to go to those years ago.
We have one where I'm at, and I have made a lot of. They meet either the first or second Tuesday of the month, and there's a Linux group here, and it's kind of cool. It's a pretty big group. It's the area I live in upstate South Carolina has a lot of technology driven jobs, so
Okay.
Linux has a pretty good presence here. We have the BMW plant here, not far from where I work, and so I don't know if they use Linux or not, but there's a lot of industry here, high tech stuff in this area. Economy is doing pretty well.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I know North Carolina did as well, didn't they? Had
Yep.
IBM and obviously Red Hat's there as
Yeah,
well.
Red Hat's there. Yeah, Red Hat, it's about 3 hours away from where I am
Oh, right.
in Raleigh.
Raleigh, yeah, that's right.
So it's funny. Do y'all know VBATS? Vincent
Yeah, I've met
Bats?
Vince a couple of times actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I met him. He used to live in Birmingham too. So for a while there, actually, we went to eat dinner one time in somewhere in downtown Birmingham. Robby, Vincent, and I years ago, and it was kind of funny because at the time I didn't know how they're like the two developers from Slackware. I'm like, what are the chances?
Yeah, it's quite unlikely, isn't it?
Yeah. So then I moved, and Robby's still in Tuscaloosa, and obviously Vincent moved to work for Red Hat.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, he did.
worked for Red Hat.
Yeah, because he used to work for Akamai.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right. Yeah, that's where I work for. I work for Akamai. Oh. Yeah, it's quite funny. I've only met Vince and Mr. Goblin, who's in the Slackware development team as well. He lives in New Zealand, so I met up with him when I was there. And
So
also
were you
Fred.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, so Fred made Slammed 64 when that was a thing. So I met Fred a couple of times as well.
So where are you all from? You're in England, and Phil, where are you at?
Northeast.
He's in
Northeast.
England.
Northeast England, near a city called Middlesbrough.
Oh wow. Okay, so both of you are in England.
Yeah, if you're English, you don't talk too much about that.
Okay.
I was just about to say something like that, but I thought it'd be polite.
Yeah. Thank you, Stuart.
That's right, you're welcome. I was going to keep quiet about that, but you know.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
I'm sure it's a very nice place.
Well, it's not the end of the world, but you can see it from here.
Oh, that's funny. I've moved around quite a bit for work. I think I've been here now 3 years almost, and I'm hoping the family doesn't want to move again. I think I've done 5 moves. That's good enough.
Are they still working for the same place though?
Yeah, I mean it's the same agency, but I have
Ah.
worked in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different offices.
Oh, I see.
So I've been 20 years in the government. I can retire in 30, but I think I'll do 40. I enjoy what I do. I really do. It's actual service. We serve the people, and we take pride in that work. So yeah, I don't see myself doing anything else until I retire.
No wonder you like Slackware then.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I do. I enjoy what I do. So
Yeah.
And we get to play with some Linux stuff. So that's always great.
Oh, that's all right. That's funny. I can't do the same job for more than about 7 years or 8 years. I tend to I need a variety after a while because I get good enough, or I kind of master it to some degree or enough that.
Right.
What you were saying before, when you're looking after the servers, after a while, you kind of okay, so they're changing the technology, but okay, it's a different virtualization, it's a different thing, but the concepts are still the same, So it's kind of well, I need to do some new things entirely. So you're looking for different types of career and different types of work.
Right. Well, our agency, the problem is that it's so. There are no certifications to do what we do with the system and how the system works. So it takes a long time to get people knowledgeable in this. So it's very difficult. If I were to leave, getting new people in, they would take some time to kind of learn the system. And, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of people that know whether to have a meteorology degree, but also are good with Linux. It's just really difficult to find. So it's good in that regards because you have job security. But, there's some times where, it can be kind of monotone, but the weather part, that changes all the time. And you have different challenges. You have winter weather. Of course, this time of the year, you'll transition into severe weather, and then summer, and then you get hurricanes in the fall. So there's maybe the technology doesn't change in what we're using it, but the weather is changing and it is affecting the software. So it's always a different challenge in how.
How does it affect the software? What do you mean?
For example, like we use the new satellite, one of the GOES. I think it's GOES R. They go by letters R and S, and a lot of them are new technology. So you're getting really high resolution data, but the higher the resolution, the bigger the file size become. So you have challenges. You can only push so much data into the pipeline of the satellite. So there's problems that you encounter, and you have to kind of there's some things that need to be done to kind of make sure the data gets through, and just things like that. That's just one example. Or the software we had to build, and there's a new bug that got introduced that we didn't see it until now. It's like, oh shoot, gotta go and address this. Just things like that it kind of keeps it interesting. Tropical weather, that's another example of hurricane season. We have to prepare for the next season here coming up soon, so we have to make sure that the software is ready to go, that we have the new names for the tropical season uploaded into the system. So there's always something going on. It's never the same over and over again, So there's enough changes that it keeps the job very interesting.
Well, that's funny, because I would have thought it would have been set. Like you've got the seasons of the year, and you've got your equipment, and it consumes data. It analyzes it, does stuff with it. But what do you mean by you have to have different labels for the weather?
Well, you
can tell I don't know anything about meteorology. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know about rain. Sun.
Well, we have for example, we had a change in our Doppler radar, where there's elevation scans where it takes, goes at 0.5 degrees. That was the baseline height, but we lowered that baseline to 0.2 degrees. So there's a lot of changes that had to occur, a lot of changes into our software in order for us to be able to make that available and be able to see the data at that elevation. So there's always something going on as far as maybe improvement to the software. There's a new feature that gets added. The builds have to be installed. The underlying programs, like how we generate a forecast and things like that, that usually doesn't change. As far as the point and clicking part, the GUI doesn't change, but there's features that are changing that you have to there's a lot of work that the engineering side, the IT side has to do. The user end, they don't ever see the change, but you do have to make sure there's changes that you have to do and tweak. Configuration files that have to be tweaked, and just things like that, like just normal system administrator things. There's always something. There's just enough to kind of keep you busy. It's kind of like a virtual factory. You have a lot of things coming in different areas. You have the satellite data coming in. You have another data source that's through the internet, and so you have many different things are coming into your factory, and when there's problems, every now and then there's problems. You have to know very quickly where the problem is at in order to troubleshoot. All
right. So what do you do to troubleshoot? Is it the software itself throws errors, or is it more of like the operating system starts?
You'll get throw errors. Generally, the way I troubleshoot, like the forecaster will say, "Hey, Angel, this software's not working quite right." I know exactly. I know what server I need to go look into for problems. Just things like that. Based on the symptoms, what they're telling me, most of the time I know where the problem's at. Either some process got hung up, or we had a bad data set that came in and kind of hosts things up a little bit. Just stuff like that.
Oh,
And
I see.
that's how I. Over the years of dealing with the system, you usually know where your problem points are, and based on the symptom or what they're telling me, I know exactly where to look. It saves a lot of time. That's the stuff you can't teach. You have to. You just have to do it.
Yeah, and even if you document it, doesn't necessarily. It's not necessarily.
No. I document a lot of it just because I'll forget. It's like I'll be like, how this problem happened before. What did I do to fix it? And I go and look at my notes. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Oh, I've done that. I mean, yeah, I think everyone does that. I used to write scripts instead of I document something. And it happens again and again. I think I must write a script to at least do some of this, so I don't have to. I could just do a little bit of manual stuff if I can't script it. That's actually one of the things I really liked about being a sysadmin. And it is because even though some of it's there's a blend of engineering, deployments, and architecture type stuff that you'd think about, but one of the great things was that yes, there was. I didn't really like the word administration of system administration, because it just kind of implied making user accounts and stuff, whereas really It was a lot more than that. It was a really technical engineering job. One of the things I liked about it, though, is that you can actually go. The whole point of it was that you go and write scripts to make your life easy.
Easier. Mm-hmm.
Or easy, yeah. Well, easier, yeah. So, and you could actually learn a lot. Well, you would always learn a lot doing that as well.
Yes.
Yeah,
I'm a jack of all trades. I'll sometimes still substitute if we need forecasting. I don't do it very often, but I can every now and then kind of watch things over if they need me for a few hours. The other day, a couple of weeks ago, we had a lot of severe weather, and I had to go work. Stop what I was doing and go help out. So you get to do all sorts of different things.
Well, it sounds like you've had a really fascinating time there.
Yes, I have.
Well, we've been talking for quite a while now, so I think I've got to go. So we'll have to call it a night.
Okay. I got to go eat dinner.
It's been really good to talk to you, Angel.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. I definitely enjoyed talking to you guys.
Goodbye from me.
Bye from me.
Goodbye from me, too.